Hi, Bert. Good. How do you sort data, and what does synthesizing mean?
Well, first you have to ask, why do you want to do it? That's the first question. Why do you want to do it? It's because if you work as a sedimentologist on one narrow interval, you're confining yourself. If you have the broader perspective, then you can see the scope of the whole thing. Like I show you a map which goes like that Exxon map, which is fully reproductive, tells you that there is Eagle Ford going all the way to Canada. So obviously the standard source bed models don't work. Oh, you got the machine going. Good, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, good.
Yeah. So the main point is sorting the data is trying to understand
The context.
the context.
Yeah.
And then try to understand what also the quality of data.
Yeah. Got it?
So Bart, which is the importance of mapping?
Mapping, you map the context. So when you map anything, you go from the big picture to the small picture. To find the context of where does your observation fit in. The observation is the data you're looking at. But if you're looking at data without knowing the context, you work in a vacuum. So you need to know the context.
How much time did you spend in the field?
Or how much time I spent in doing field work?
Yes.
In net years, probably something like, I don't know what, let's say 3 net years in Italy and 3 net years in Canada, about 6 or 7 years in net years, spread over a period of about 25 years, so it's not that much.
The main purpose of that being mapping?
In Canada, I was mapping or else supervising a big enterprise in mapping. And the results of this mapping are all in the files in Calgary, which to my understanding are people don't know where these things are stashed away. They're in a warehouse. So you're looking at the mapping which cost millions of dollars and involved, as I said, it involves 7 helicopters, about 4 fixed-wing planes, and every summer a crew of geologists of about 4 geologists per party. That will be 4 times 7, 28. About 30 geologists every summer with complete helicopter and working the photogeology in the winter. So it's the most complete coverage of that part of the Cordillera, and it's basically lost.
Why is lost?
Because people don't know where it is. At least I always asked Steve, for instance, says, well, did you find them? He says, the people in Calgary can't find it. Last time I knew it was in a warehouse in Calgary.
This is an important concept, like senior and geologists, that there are most of them emeritus now. Most of their job is sometimes lost.
Correct. Not because it's not existent, unless it was eliminated by a filing organization or a librarian, it still may be there.
But it is also true that even if they are not materially lost, they are lost in the huge also in the huge masses of papers that you have nowadays.
Correct,
so
yeah.
Also young people, they don't go back to read papers that are 40, 50, 60 years old.
So what you need is a system which allows people to retrieve them. The first thing you need to know is that these things exist in the first place. If I wouldn't have told you about it, you wouldn't know it. You have to know the existence, or you have to guess that they may exist. Huh? And then you have to go is, where are they if they still exist? And if you do that, then you have persons in there, earth scientists, who are able to classify these things. And classifying and sorting them out is basically, you need technical guidance for that. You cannot leave that to a clerk or a librarian, because they don't know what questions to ask. Today in the computer world, you should have everything accessible in the virtual library. So you have to invest in the virtual library.
Does it make sense to go back and read papers that were written 30, 40 years ago when the theories were different?
The theories have nothing to do with it, it's observations. The problem is that people think you have to test the theory. So everybody is supposed to test hypotheses. That's not the way it works today, and that's not the way it ever worked. It's new data and new systems and new information. So the hypothesis is a consequence of the new information, and the information is not a consequence of the hypothesis.
That means that the new technology is driving hypothesis.
The technology drives information. If you say technology and knowledge is the same thing, or are related, say technology and knowledge is related, then you have to basically find a way by which you can preserve knowledge. And a hypothesis without knowledge, without a priori knowledge or first knowledge, is a hypothesis which is done in a vacuum. In the earth sciences anyway, or in geology.
According to your experience, have you seen any change in the relationship technology-knowledge?
In what relationship?
Technology and knowledge. Have they always had the same relationship in the whole course of your career?
No, it has changed. First it was a hammer and a microscope. When I started my career, it was a hammer and a microscope. And now it's seismic profiles and e-logs and a whole host of data, none of which I master. And there's nobody who knows everything of anything, so you have to recognize that what your limitations are, and you have to be able to communicate to a colleague directly, rather than in a meeting, to understand what he's doing. So if you want to know something about isotope geochemistry and you're not an isotope specialist, then you got to go and see the person who says, what are you doing? Try to explain it to me. So you get an understanding what they're doing. And the same thing for geophysicists, and the same thing for economists, for that matter, anything.
So is it important to reuse the old methods, like the hammer in the field?
No, of course, if you do field work, you use a hammer, right? So if you want to have that kind of detail, you go in the field and use the old method. If you want to have modern things, you get yourself, like you have a machine that produces you a synthetic log of what you see in the field. Well, use it. But I say don't go out in the field where there are seismic profiles without looking at a seismic profile first. Because you need to know the context of the point which you're looking at. Like in the Apennines, when you look at an allochthonous point of view, you have to ask how allochthonous and what does it mean in the overall picture. That brings you right back to reconstructions, which is still, you can do it with computers, of course, but it's still a derivative from an observation. It's not a theory, it's no test, it's just simple geometry. You reconstruct things, see where they are, and then you can start theorizing. But you don't start first with the theory and then do the rest of it. You need the observations, and the observations have to be done in a context.
Have you ever used the same kind of methodology in your research, or you change it in the course of your life?
I have changed I don't use any methodologies. I just improvise and try to adapt myself to new technology. I'm not a geophysicist. If I was trained as anything, I was trained as a micropaleontologist. So, but it's pointless to say that to anybody. It's no point to tell anybody that I was a micropaleontologist. And that I looked basically when I spent a year in Lamont, or an academic year, about 8 months or so, looking at nothing but deep sea cores and basically trying to understand what we knew about that time about global change. And that was as recently as 1954. So, global change is no news to me. I worked for it by looking at forams. But I went on and did different things. Then I got familiar with seismic profiles. I went to seismic profiles and integrated traditional surface geology with modern surface geology, with helicopters and so on, with seismic profiles.
By the way, when did you realize this importance of the combo geologic mapping and seismic interpretation?
I didn't realize any importance. It was just opportunity which presented them. And when I dealt with management in Shell, they recognized the opportunity and say, let's do it. So it was not my realization or anything. It's just an fund which was basically on a direct relationship with management, very direct. Simple, straightforward relationship. What should we do? And says, well, let's do that.
So was it you proposing to do this combo, or the management?
Quite often it was, sometimes it was management. Management in Canada decided, for instance, that we should shoot seismic lines across the foothills. I didn't decide that.
But
but then management was quite far-sighted, and it was the first time that anybody shot regional seismic profiles across the folded belt. I saw that as an opportunity, so I had nothing to do with the original decision. It was a management decision. But I understood the impact of it.
So somebody says, because of this, that you have been a pioneer.
I've not been a pioneer. I've been just doing my thing. In the case of Shell, working with the management, which was they were thinking big. And so it was a management decision, which I was involved with to some degree, but it was not my decision. It was I came to Canada because Shell decided to explore the foothills, not because I decided it all. And they asked me to figure it out for them, and we worked together.
Talking about decisions, how much freedom in your research you have at the university now, or in the last period of your life, with respect to the oil companies?
About the same. I think in the oil company, I was in the oil industry, I probably was more of an exception because I happened to fall into certain things. But it was about the same. Now, when I left Shell, everybody told me that I was a fool to leave Shell. I just wanted to go teaching. And some people in Shell understood that, so we had quite an amicable separation. But everybody told me, you'll never have the same database which you have at Shell. It turned out it was the other way around. I personally had more access to a global database than I ever had at Shell, which includes projects in China, projects in India, projects in Morocco, projects in Venezuela, projects in all over the place, Peru, you name them. Italy.
This is unusual.
That's not unusual. It's what you did is, I had some experience. I did what may have been unusual, that I took early retirement from Shell because I wanted to go teaching.
Why did you want to go teaching?
Because I was interested in what they were doing. I was interested in plate tectonics. I want to share my experience with others.
So it's more the teaching to the students or more the interaction with your peers?
Oh, it was mostly teaching to the students. I'm more interested in teaching and working with the younger generation and interacting with with the peers. I like to interact with my peers. There's no. But what drives me is working with students. I can, if I want to interact with peers, I can stay in the oil company. I don't have to go to the academic world.
What remains to be accomplished from you? What do you think that still remains to be accomplished?
Well, you have to integrate a lot of data and then work out some system by which you can preserve the information and pass it on. You don't want to lose information. I'm interested in information. I'm not really interested in inventing a new hypothesis. So what you do is you simply go and work on things, but then you need to present them in some form that it communicates to others. So one of the key factors then, particularly when you need with management, which I find interesting, it's interesting to talk to management. They are very smart people who do good things, so you'll have to find some way to communicate to them without talking down to them, and in a formal way say that they understand what the context is. They cannot possibly remember everything which you know. It's not possible for anybody. If you give a talk in a meeting, nobody can possibly remember everything which was made. To make communicate in a form to them that is simplified, which is why I was interested in recently in making a whole number of simplified global maps. The maps you see hanging on the walls, they got too much information. Nobody can look at them, has the time to look at them. And the younger generation doesn't even know how to read a map. So you need that information, but you cannot expect somebody who has other things to decide. It's quite important. There's also in academia. You have to be able to simplify things to a way that people don't get totally bamboozled by all the information. There's no point dumping a whole bunch of knowledge on somebody if you cannot simply say, well, this is what it means and therefore you should do it. Or therefore you might want to consider to do it.
And how do you deal when you have to oversimplify, and at some point oversimplifications brings you to not truth because you're oversimplifying?
No, when you oversimplify, the key thing is to have a simplification which is honest, and any simplification has errors in it, and particularly if it involves a lot of data. And you say, well, this is you present the idea. Don't call it an hypothesis. It's just pompous. It's just an idea you have, and you want to follow up on that idea. In the case of an oil company, you want to follow up because you think in the end it might help them to find more oil, more gas, whatever it is.
So what would you like that others, not you, resolve in your field of study?
What others should get from my field of studies?
What would you like like people involved in your field of study, what would you like them to discover? If there's still
I think I like them to discover what they want to discover. If you're interested in bauxite, well, discover bauxite. But understand the context of something like that. I don't want anybody to discover anything. People have to go and be interested in their own interest, and I'm just an adjunct in the whole thing.
What do you mean you're an agent?
An adjunct, if somebody wants to say that if you want to talk to me like we talk right now, I want to be helpful in trying to get you what you're interested in. But I'll focus more on the context of what you're interested in than the thing itself, which you are the specialist. You're teaching me what you're going to do with your thing. The specialist teaches me. I'm not a specialist. I'm a generalist. Okay. But I've done a lot of things which require a fair amount of technical knowledge or experience. The specialist knows why he wants to be a specialist. And some specialists eventually decide, like me, that you'd like to see more than just a specialty.
When did you change?
I did not change, I just evolved.
When did you evolve?
I evolved over the period of, when did I start? When I left high school. I evolved ever since. It's not something that I made a decision, I do this, I do that, nothing. It's just, it's a combination of being interested, being active, serendipity, a lot of serendipity.
So you didn't really plan your career?
No, I didn't plan any career. I went to a management school in Banff years ago. It was the only management school ever. I don't manage. It's basically to train management. I didn't want to be a manager. And Shell was happy to use me as a technical person.
Among the several important geologists that you have known, which one impressed you the most?
Oh, a lot of geologists impressed me the most. But people had probably a long interest. Was one of my thesis advisors. I was his assistant. Was Leupold. There is a Global Tuncana or Talipora or something called Leupoldi. Well, that Leupold. And he was a teacher at in Zurich at the ETH, or the university, at the department. And he was very broadly gauged. He was very broad. I learned from him micropaleontology, basically what you call structural interpretations about source beds, petroleum geology, and engineering geology. So I was involved, not only as a student, I was involved in hydrocarbon exploration in Ragusa, in Sicily, which was successful, led to the discovery of an oil field. Not many students can say I mapped an oil field, a structure which became an oil field, and recommended that it be drilled. Not many students can say that before they get their PhD. But at the same time, I also worked on tunnels in the metamorphic cores of the Alps. And there were engineering problems, like when you dig a tunnel, you have to watch out whether there's water break-in, and you shouldn't disrupt the water supply of a city like Locarno. I had to do with that. I had to make a prediction and say you have the water-bearing horizon for the city of Locarno will be intercepted by that tunnel. Therefore, we have to know it something like 10 meters ahead of time, so we can put cement in the whole thing so that we don't keep the aquifer intact.
Is there?
That was not something I was simply involved and asked to do a job. It was not me who invented the whole thing. I didn't do the project.
Is there anybody that disappoints you?
People disappoint me? Yeah, sure. Sure, some people disappoint me. But I refer to that, if somebody disappoints me, I refer to that if I thought he was very good and instead turned out to be not that good, I simply say I drilled a dry hole. You know, drilling a dry hole is probably the most important experience anybody can have. It's important to be wrong, and that your bosses accepted that you are wrong, and that you're able to explain it and you learn your lessons from it. Much more important to be wrong than being right. There's no point saying I told you so.
So a lot of dry holes.
But at the time it was 1 out of 7. One discovery out of 7.
Oh, I mean
that was the industry average.
I mean the metaphoric dry holes.
Huh?
The metaphoric dry holes with the people that disappoint
lots
you.
of them. Not with people, with myself, anything.
What's your relationship with Peter Weil?
Very good friend of mine. I was instrumental in getting him to Rice, to the Rice University, and I'm certainly an admirer of his. I disagree with a lot of things he says. We discuss friendly, or we used to discuss in a friendly way about things we saw differently.
What's the main thing that you disagree on with Peter Weil's ideas?
It's not that I disagree with what he's doing, but the impact he has on having the standard stratigraphic model with flooding surfaces and low stands and high stands and the whole thing. It basically doesn't recognize the tectonic components in conformities. So it's far more important to understand, or it's equally important to understand what he calls first and second order cycles, which are not cycles, they are just events, as opposed to certain fourth order conventional sequence stratigraphy. So it's not Peter who is responsible for this. People who ran with it, apostles, which ran with Pete's philosophy and tried to convince people that this is the unique solution to things. It's not.
What's your relationship with Daniele Bernoulli?
Good friend. Good friend. He's a good friend, and I've known him for ages. So we've talked a lot about things. He and I both like Italy. He still is mapping now in Mendrisio, he's a mapping sheet, and I have, I met him first time personally. I met him on a field trip in Romania. So we shared our room, we got to know each other, and we became good friends.
And why do you have so many relationships with Italian geologists?
Because I grew up in Rome. I grew up in Mussolini's Rome. I was in Piazza when Mussolini gave a talk. I had the pleasure to be among the school kids who welcomed Adolf Hitler when he came to Rome. I knew people like Goering and Goebbels and the whole journey. I went to a school which had some Nazi teachers and some non-Nazi teachers, so I've seen the whole pre-war Italy. I've been in Italy visiting. I went to school in Switzerland during the war, but visiting my parents in Rome. And right after the war I decided I want to do my thesis area in Italy, so that's why I went to the Majella. So I have a long-standing. Then when I was in Canada, of course, I didn't do any contacts, and then when I came back to the academic world, I decided to have a project in Italy. Got my contacts with ANI, with some people, geologists who worked for AGIP at the time. And I did field work in Italy and started giving courses in Italy, including in Italian textbooks. courses in Torino. I gave courses in where did I give courses? In Palermo, various Perugia, various places. So I gave courses and lectures and field trips and everything.
So during your professional life, you have lived the revolution of the plate tectonics. Is there anything similar in the air nowadays?
No, I don't think so. No, I don't think so. There's anything. The revolution, if it's calling it a revolution is just a form of hype. It's an evolution of concept. It was a change in North America because by and large the North American geoscience establishment didn't accept Wegener's hypothesis, mobilistic hypothesis of Wegener, Argo, and all these people, and I was schooled in them. So when I went to the Columbia University, I was confronted with a whole bunch of people who basically thought the oceans were autochthonous. There was no ocean spreading. There was a large amount of resistance against European type mobilism, but I was brought up by mobilists. Continental drift was a familiar thing, but we didn't have all the oceanographic information. And what brought the change for the American earth science community was that it was their data and their oceanographic words which led them to conclude that the oceans were caused by spreading. So for them it was a revolution, but the concept was not a revolution at all. So what you're looking at is basically a form of hype. I remember meetings we had with plate tectonics meetings. They pointed out, people like Bullard in England and others pointed out in a meeting that explorers need to know about plate tectonics so they could explore on opposite passive margins. Well, basically that's true, but they would have done that anyway without plate tectonics. So plate tectonics has a huge impact on geology, but exploration could have functioned quite well for quite a few years without plate tectonics. It doesn't matter. Plate tectonics is a good concept. It helps, so I'm not going to ignore it. But some people in plate tectonics accused me and saying that I was a mobilist, that I was against plate tectonics, because I saw there were some problems. So there's some people who still remind me that I was opposing. I never did oppose plate tectonics. I was trained as a mobilist, and to me it was a perfectly reasonable concept. But once that's said, there are a lot of things, questions like plates being rigid. Well, plates are not rigid, and at least 1/3 or 2/3 are. So when you make a reconstruction of plate or base of plate rotations, it's an assumption which is workable. It's a good approximation, but it doesn't work in any folded belt. When you work in a folded belt, like you cross the Alps or the Himalayas, you don't see anything rigid. Everything was deformed. So over the years, so part of plate tectonics, the exaggeration of the importance of things and the methodology, led them to disregard the fact that in reality folded belts are not rigid deformation. So,
how do you see the earth science community right now? Do you see it as a dynamic community in terms?
No, not right now. No, right now, at least in the United States, it's driven by what I call the NSF National Academy cartel. It's a group of people who decides what needs to be studied. So once you have the blessing of Washington, of these scientific institutions in Washington, not the political ones, you get money for research in academia. If you don't have the blessing, you don't get money for research. The universities, they are interested in the overhead the professors bring in, so you don't advance as a professor in university unless you bring in money. And the money has to be NSF-driven money. So it has to be approved by the National Science Foundation. So the more your money you raise for your research from NSF, the larger your chances that you make an academic career.
Which are the topics where we stuck on because of these processes, and which are the topics that they don't get any fund?
Well, the main topics have to go back to the original. Is that you right now everything is tied to the to basically to hypotheses. And but the hypothesis is not all testing hypothesis, and that's not the way it works. You need data, and you need data management, and you need money to do data management. There is no money for data management, and no significant money. So all the data, which was the original part of the conversations, are one reason why they get lost irretrievably, is that there's not enough investment to do intelligent earth science oriented create systems which allow you to find those things. Google is chaotic. Google is complete chaos. Huh? If you know what if you have the right questions, you can find a lot of things. But if you don't know what the right questions are, if you don't know what to look for, you don't even know what questions to ask. So it's a very common. If you want to know about tectonics of Tibet, Google tectonics Tibet. Huh? That's not a bad way to start. And you'll get something like 1/5 of the recent stuff, and just to have a figure, and you get nothing about the past stuff.
So one very important thing about earth science is that earth science needs to be better organized in a data management mode.
Yeah. In data management, the earth science are dismally poor. The people I work with are good in data management, but they are no longer really very active. Is CNC Reservoirs, which is a group here in town. They write reports, and they have on large oil fields. So some of the data, some of the oil companies like IHL and what is it? There's two companies. CNC Reservoirs is the one I work with. Petro Consult used to be the other one. It's now IHS. They do data management, but it's not really. It's more oriented towards reserve estimates than towards geological questions. But they provide good background.
Once you have an optimum in data management, what is next?
Well, this will only happen when you are no longer living. So you don't worry about what's next in 10 years, in 70 years ago. What you have to worry is what next in the next. You don't. What I'm talking about is an effort, about systematic effort, which goes about for 10 years.
But is that the goal itself of earth science?
It's not the goal itself. It's just simply an adjunct of what you have to do. It's like driving a car.
Can you explain it?
Well, basically with the data management now, as I see it, is data management which is so fossilized, or so embryonic, if you wish. It's like an early Ford. So what you need is something which allows people to ask the right questions, trains them to ask the right question, and stores the information, in a form that you can retrieve it, and that you can also retrieve the old song. If the first place I would go to for data management to find out is go to the Vatican. The Vatican has some pretty good, their library is quite well organized. And they had to go back to they have a system by which they retrieve data, theological data and biblical data from the year 900. Huh?
So what you mean is that once you have the optimum in the management of data, then it's going to be easier to answer a question, whatever it is.
But you lose less time to find the information, never mind answering the question. The question you ask is asking, do I have information, right? Knowledge is basically data, is information, right? So when you ask a question, you say, well, I need some information. I don't need a hypothesis and make like a hole in the head. I want to know what's there before I decide what I could do with it or what it could be. I have to know what's there.
Okay, and how do you train people to have good questions?
I think, speaking of the book Regional Geology, as you teach people regional geology in the earth sciences. Regional geologist is the way by which you tell them the relationship between plate tectonics and hotspots and source beds and good Lord knows what.
What are key questions that are intriguing you right now?
Oh, there are lots of questions. I'm intrigued by conformities. If I had to start a new research project, which I won't, it would be basically on conformities. And conformology is probably the highest priority for me. And what you do there is you find out the best ways to map conformities, first and second order conformities, or separating first and second order sequences of peat whale, and map them and map the subcrops of these conformities to see what happened before and after the conformity was formed. And what happened tectonically before it was formed, or else oceanographically. There is no science called conformology, and it needs to be created urgently. When you talk about sequence, you talk just about the sequences, but you don't talk about the hiatus between the sequences. So that I think requires a lot of attention. A fair number of things are covered in old books by Leverson, for instance. There's a book by Leverson, and the Shell Atlas. The Shell Stratigraphic Atlas is people who would have the time to look at it and figure out what it is, particularly the one the Shell has with the source beds. You'd have a lot of questions, but what you have to have the curiosity. Says, I want to understand what's in the Shell Atlas. It's not going to be, and I can't force anybody to study the Shell Atlas. You have it in here. I can't force anybody to study it. But you need the time, therefore, to find out what's in there and what's the scope of it. And you have to sort it out yourself. I could tell you what to look for. But you have to sort itself, what's the meaning of those things. And then you have to translate that back into seismic reflection, seismic profiles. So in my mind, the hiatus is the big area of no knowledge. And you're better off to find out what you don't know than what you know. The farther back you go back in time, the less you know.
So Bert, the last question is, what is important in life?
Family. Period.
Thank you very much, Bert. Thank you.
Family and faith. That means religion.
When I talked with Bob Falk, he
Yeah.
also said the same thing, that faith is very important.
Right.
But also, yeah, both for himself and for the science he made.
Yeah. Right. Faith is very important.
Which part of the faith?
Well, if you're Catholic, you're a Catholic, okay? If you're Protestant, you're Protestant, right?
But, I mean, you probably avoid the dogmas of religions.
No, that's not dogma. It's what you believe. Whether you believe there is something higher, whether you don't understand, first of all, you say you don't understand it, huh? You sit on a mountaintop and say, gee, this is beautiful. You like it, okay? You go on the beach and say this is beautiful. You see a sunset, see the sun going down, seeing the going up. Why is it beautiful? I don't know. I have no idea why it's beautiful, but I know what's beautiful. And faith comes in is that you think that there's some reason for its being beautiful. And some people take traditional beliefs. I'm a Catholic, and I know what the people in home do better than most. But that has nothing to do with it. It has to do with some kind of Christian ethic, if you wish, and some feeling that you are not in control of everything. But the end result is good.
Is the faith growing with your age or diminishing?
It changes. As a field geologist, you have moments, I'm sure you had as a field geologist moments like that. I have moments when you say, I remember sitting on a hill in Giarratana in Sicily, you say, boy, this is incredible, huh? And you say, well, I didn't go to church. It's incredible. But there has to be something which I don't understand, which is responsible for it. What it says, I don't understand. Therefore, I need faith.
So you need it.
Yeah. And you have moments like that, particularly when you do field work or elsewhere. So why not have faith?
Yeah, as the philosopher said, if you have to bet, it's better to bet on faith.
Right. And you can decide whether you like Buddhism or anything. As a kid, I still read Hermann Hesse, the German writer. For instance, he has a lot of interesting aspects on religion, more on Buddhism and this whole thing. And I'm interested in the Catholic Church, yeah. So, what's wrong with that? Why not?
Nothing
You
wrong.
got to have faith. If you have a family and children, teach them to have faith. It's more important to teach them faith than anything else.
Sometimes people, they think that faith and science, they don't go hand in hand.
I should have a pamphlet somewhere which I pass you on. There's a big, evolution is the big, here in the States, evolution is the big thing.
Well, beside this very
the church says they are against evolution. The church has never said they're against evolution. They did have problems with evolution, and they don't like the notion that men derive from monkeys. Okay, and I think evolution is a reality. But these things are not incompatible. It's when you decide to make it a conflict and make it incompatible, then it's going to be incompatible. Somebody decides to make it an issue, and just don't make it an issue. Look at what you know and say, well, fine, this is what it is. What I want to show you, I don't have that here, but I'll find it maybe. little pamphlet I wrote for a Jesuit priest. Long story.
It seems that there are several layers of reality, and it seems that today the community wants to be very manichaeist, either this or that, and there's no
No,
acceptance.
that's bullshit. Manichaeism is, of course, this is a bunch of nonsense. You are yourself, and you got to decide what you think is alike. And the main important thing is that, my God, this world. I mean, there's a lot of crap going on in politics and wars and everything else. But there's so many beautiful things which go out and see the sun today. You know. It doesn't make any difference what Obama says or what the Republicans say or anybody else. Go and look at today and enjoy it. Which reminds me, that's what I should do.
Let's go. Okay.
Anyway, there are so many things.
Thank you, Bert.